I would like to shock Japan. It's one of my favorite countries in the world, as I said, and I don't want it to be ruined. Japan has very serious problems ahead of it unless something changes. And I love Japan. I mean, where will we get our sushi in 50 years? I hope somebody's shocked. I hope somebody wakes up and worries and makes changes. Basically, on the facts, economic facts, the ruble is better than the yen.
Okay, so Jim Rogers-san, welcome to PIVOT. It's so great to have you on.
I'm delighted to be here, Ryan. I love Japan.
Thank you so much.
Japan is one of my favorite countries in the whole world.
Okay, great. So I just finished reading your book. It said 捨てられる日本, which literally means maybe abandoned Japan or a Japan, a forgotten country. So first of all, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what do you think about the title of the book?
Well, it doesn't matter what I think. What do you think? What does the Japanese reading public think?
I think, I think a lot of Japanese readers will be shocked because you've mentioned 6 scenarios on the beginning of the book, but I think it's a very shocking title for a Japanese audience.
Well, I would like to shock Japan. It's one of my favorite countries in the world, as I said, and I don't want it to be ruined. Japan has very serious problems ahead of it unless something changes. And I love Japan. I mean, where will we get our sushi in 50 years? I hope somebody's shocked. I hope somebody wakes up and worries and makes changes.
So on the beginning of your book, you mentioned about 6 scenarios. And you mentioned about people will start abandoning Japanese yen. Number 2, large debt will hurt the Japanese economy. Number 3, the rise of the interest rates will bring severe damage to the Japanese economy. And number 4, inflation. And number 5, you mentioned about food self-sufficiency rate, which is very low compared to other developed countries, and also the aging society. So there are 6 worst-case scenarios. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, Japan has staggering debt, and the debt goes up every day, higher and higher and higher. Tokyo, I don't know why they do. I know why they do it, but I wish they would not do it because it's going to ruin Japan. I mean, the debt goes up every day, and the population goes down every day. Mm-hmm. That cannot be good for any country. That cannot be good for Japan. So I hope that somebody will be shocked and worried because Japan is one of the best countries in the world. I love Japan. I do not want to see Japan destroyed. I hope nobody wants to see Japan destroyed, and I hope that somebody will make changes.
So what do you think about Japanese yen? Because last year, once Japanese yen reached 150 yen, which is very weak, what do you think about the current status of Japanese yen?
Well, from an investor's point of view, I'm surprised it's not weaker. The Japanese debt goes up every day, and the central bank prints money as fast as it can. The head of the central bank said that he will print, and his word is unlimited amounts of money. But when you print unlimited amounts of money, the currency usually declines. I can remember when the Japanese yen was over 300. So it can go much, much lower, and it will unless somebody in Japan changes things.
So what should we do? What should Japan do?
What should Japan do? That's easy. I mean, I will tell you, they're not going to do it. It's easy for me to tell you, but they will not do it. But you have to stop spending. You have to stop gigantic deficit spending. You have to stop printing money. You have to have more babies, or you have to let in more immigrants. So, I mean, the debt goes higher and the population goes down. You have to change that, or there will not be a Japan in 50 years. Now, I told you what you can do. It's easy. It's easy to do what I said. Will they do it? No.
So why is that? You said it's easy. You told us the solutions. Why is Japan, the government, not doing anything?
From the politician's point of view, it's easier to take money printing, buy votes, be nice to everybody, and say to everybody, everything is okay. And from the politician's point of view, they don't have to worry. They will not be here in 50 years. But young people will be here in 50 years. They have to worry, but the politicians don't care because the politicians will be gone.
I see. I want to go back to the Japanese yen from an investor's point of view. So Japanese yen used to be kind of a safe haven for investors. Is that the same situation right now, or is that also changing?
Well, that is partly because most Japanese investors and most Japanese population did not invest very much outside of Japan, and they mainly just bought Japanese yen. That's where they put their money. More and more people are understanding that the currency is being debased, But for a long time, nobody even thought about another currency. Now, people are realizing, oh my gosh, what do we do? And so the Japanese yen, as more and more Japanese understand what's happening, and as more and more international investors understand, I mean, they're printing a lot of money every day. That is not sound. That has never been sound. Even if you don't know economics, you can read history, and countries that print a lot of money suffer with their currency.
Right. Also in your book, you mentioned about the Russian ruble, and what's shocking that maybe people will trust the Russian ruble much more than the Japanese yen. So could you elaborate on that? Yeah.
Well, Russia doesn't have nearly as much debt as many other countries because nobody would lend money to the communists before. So their debt is not nearly as high on a historic basis. They have huge resources. So the ruble fundamentally, on an economic basis, is sounder than many other countries. Now, nobody trusts the Russians and nobody trusts Mr. Putin, but that's one reason the Russian ruble is not even stronger. But fundamentally, it's not a very dangerous currency, not at the moment anyway. But if you trust Mr. Putin, you should buy the ruble.
So you're stating that Japanese yen is weaker than the ruble.
Well, the facts are that the Japanese print a lot of money every day and build up higher and higher debt every day, and the population is declining. Those are simple facts. The Russians do not print nearly as much money every day. They don't have the huge debt that the Japanese do. And the Russians have gigantic resources. I mean, look at a map, you'll see. The Russians have many, many more resources than nearly anybody in the world. So fundamentally, Russia is on those facts, the Russian ruble is sounder. Now, you have to consider more than those facts. You have to consider Mr. Putin. You have to consider many other things, such as war and what they're doing with the money. But basically, on the facts, economic facts, the ruble is better than the yen.
So, Jim, you have a lot of friends in Japan. Do you think that Japanese people are beginning to wake up and realize that situation, or do you think we need more shock to face the reality?
I hope that the Japanese people will start to understand, especially young Japanese people, because they're the ones who are going to be affected. Right. I mean, the old Japanese people are probably okay, because if Japan collapses, it's not going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to take a while. But young Japanese people should start to worry, because they are going to have a very bad future unless something changes.
So as an individual, do you have any advice for people in their, suppose, 10-year-old or 40 years old or 65 years old? Do you have any advice?
If you are a 10-year-old Japanese, you better learn a foreign language, and you better learn a skill that you can protect yourself if there is social unrest. Always in history, when countries get deeper and deeper into debt, there is social unrest. Not this year, but in their lifetime. So young Japanese should be sure to learn another language, because you may have to leave, you may have to flee, you may have to run away, and be able to protect yourself. Develop a martial art. I mean, I love Japan. I don't want to suggest that people leave, but they may have to if things get worse and worse, if you're 10 years old. If you're 40 years old, you should start developing a plan B. You should have some of your assets in other countries, partly because there are opportunities in other countries, but also in case you have to escape. If Japan falls into terrible times, then you may have to escape. So you should have some assets in another country. You should have a plan B in case you need it. I hope you never need it. We hope you never need it, but be prepared in case you do.
Several questions. So suppose you mentioned about foreign language. Do you mean we should learn English or Chinese or any particular?
Well, everybody has to pick their own. If you love America or England or something, English would be a good language to learn. It is a language which is used all over the world. But China's your neighbor. It's a gigantic country. It's going to be extremely important in the next century. So Chinese is a good example. Spanish, I mean, millions of people in the world speak Spanish. There are several languages that can be on your list. My main desire is that everybody learn a second language, whichever you want, for whatever reason, to be prepared. You probably have an insurance policy. You have a fire insurance policy in case your house burns down. You hope you never need your fire insurance policy. You hope your house never burns down. But if you need it, it's good to have it. Likewise, prepare in case Japan collapses. So have a plan B.
I want to talk about Plan B. So a lot of Japanese people are worried because the yen is weak and it doesn't make sense for a person in Japan to put your savings in a bank account. So people are becoming more interested in US stocks and foreign assets. Do you recommend Japanese audience to buy US stocks?
Well, I recommend that everybody have assets in another country, but it should be a country where you know something. I mean, if you love Australia and you go to Australia every year on holiday, you probably should invest in Australia. If you love Germany and go to Germany every year on holiday, you should probably learn about investing in Germany. It depends on what you love and know. Yes, the most important is to invest in what you know a lot about. You decide what you know and love, and that's where you should invest. You should not invest in America because I have investments in America. Maybe you don't know anything about America. If you don't know, do not invest in America. But if you know a lot about Korea or Italy or some country, think about investing there.
Why is it important to know about that country or in addition to love that country? Why is that important in investing?
Well, everybody is different. Some people follow sports. Some people follow music. Some people follow, they have books or literature. It depends on what your own interests are. Some people love Italian food and they love Italy because of Italian whatever. So I don't know what people love, and you should figure out what you don't listen to what I love. Yes, I love Italian food. I love Japanese food. But I'm telling you that you should be diversified. You should have some interest and some assets outside your own country. And first of all, it's a way to make money. But second, it's an insurance policy. But do not listen to me. Figure out what you love. Figure out what you know. That's how you will be successful. Stay with what you know.
Interesting. So our publication PIVOT, there are a lot of young business leaders who watch our show, and they're interested in U.S. stocks because unlike Japan, the population of U.S. is growing, and there's a lot of innovation going on, and a lot of talented and skilled workers entering the workforce. So we tend to think that U.S. is still growing. Do you agree or do you disagree on that point?
Well, the U.S. is the richest economy, the largest economy in the world, and the U.S. is growing population-wise. But remember, the U.S. is the larger debtor nation in the history of the world. No nation in world history has had as much debt as the U.S., and the U.S. debt gets bigger and bigger and bigger every day. If you still want to invest in the U.S., it's okay, but be sure you know all the facts before you do it. Yes, I have U.S. investments. I have U.S. children. But that does not mean I'm not aware of the problems and the difficulties and the potential problems in the U.S. If you know what you're doing, you can make money in the U.S. Sure, there are plenty of ways to make money in the U.S. But just be sure you stay with what you know.
How about the recent news on the big tech, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Meta, Microsoft, they're starting to lay off people. Do you think there's a kind of a shift of trend in the U.S. economy, or how can we, what do you think about those news?
Well, I'm an American. I don't like the trend in the U.S. The debt is getting higher and higher and higher. We had a lot of debt before, but since 2008, 2009, the debt is skyrocketing in the U.S. It is not good. It's a good time to be an old American. I don't have to pay the debt, but I have 2 teenage children, and they are going to have many, many problems in their lifetime because of the American debt and the American money printing. And of course, America has many wars around the world. So I love America. I am an American. But I explained to my children, you must be prepared because in your lifetime, America is going to have many problems. 1923, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was nobody else. 50 years later, it was bankrupt. It took only 50 years because they built debt and did a lot of mistakes. America is making many mistakes, and so America is going to have many, many problems in the lifetime of my children. If they know that, and if they're prepared, they will be okay. Britain went bankrupt in 1976, but there were people in Britain who had a wonderful time, great success. Have you ever heard of the Beatles?
Yes, I love Beatles.
The Beatles lived in Britain in the 50s and 60s and 70s and were very successful, even though the country was going bankrupt.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so also in your book, you mentioned about the rise and fall of major empires, maybe the Dutch, the British, And do you think the next with China will be the next big empire replacing the United States?
Well, as I look at the U.S., as I look at the world and history, the nation on top has never lasted more than 100, 200 years. The countries have always changed from being on top. Somebody else replaces them. The U.S. has been on top for a long, long time. It has built up huge debt. So history would say that the U.S. is not going to stay on top forever. That's why I said my daughter, will have to worry about that. Somebody is going to replace the U.S. Somebody has always replaced the country on top. As I look around the world now, it seems to me it will be China. Maybe it will be somebody else. If you know who it's going to be, and you think it's not the U.S., please do not announce it on this show. Send me an email. Send me an email so I will know who the next country is going to be. I know it's not going to be Japan, not the way things are going now in Japan.
Interesting. What will be the time span of? So to me, it seems that U.S. is still a very huge, big country, and U.S. dollar is a major medium for international exchange. What's like the time span of how long will the United States last as the superpower?
Well, I will go back to Britain, in the 1920s. Britain was the number one country in the world in every way, militarily, financially, in every way. 50 years later, in 1976, it went bankrupt.
Right.
It went bankrupt. It only took 50 years. Now, it had been on top for a while from the 1920s. So America is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. The debt is going higher and higher and higher every day. The U.S. has many military adventures that are taking place around the world. So history would indicate a country with gigantic debt that's going deeper and deeper in debt, which fights a lot of wars, is going to come to an end. As I said, it's a good time to be old. I'm old enough that I don't have to pay all these problems in 30 years, 40 years. My children will have the problems. And there will be problems, just as there were problems for England in the 1920s and after.
Interesting. I want to continue talking about China. So I agree that China is a big economic power, but some people argue that China will never prevail because without democracy, they will not be a world leader. Do you think that will be an issue for China, that their political system is very different from the Western countries?
Well, democracy is certainly the least bad system. There are many systems in history, and democracy has always been one of the least bad. I mean, there are many problems with democracy, but it's less bad than most other systems. We all know that China does not have democracy like Switzerland or some countries. But so far, they've done a brilliant job in the last 40 years without a democracy. Mao Zedong died in 1976. He was a horrible dictator. They haven't had democracy since, but they've done a brilliant job of growing since then. Yes, democracy is less bad than other things, but there are also successful countries in history that have not been democracies. And there have been many democracies which have had many problems.
I see. So a lot of Japanese people are worried about the U.S.-China relationship right now. It's kind of the next Cold War, and also about business conflicts. If the U.S. government is trying to ban TikTok, and so what should, as a business person living in Japan, what should we do? Do you think we should stand aside to the United States or kind of keep away from the fight? What's your opinion on that?
Well, if I were Japan, I certainly would not get into a fight. I would try to avoid any fight. You have a constitution which says you will not fight. I hope you do not change it. I know that the politicians want to change it so they can get votes. They can get more votes. I would not. If I were Japan, I would try to stay neutral and stay out of wars, because wars have never been good for anybody, including the people that think they win the wars. So I do not like to see what's happening between the U.S. and China. But throughout history, when you have a country on top and another country rising, they have very often clashed, not always, and they certainly do not have to clash. No, they do not have to clash in history. But the U.S. and China, partly because politicians like to have someone they can blame for their problems. So I'm sure that in my children's lifetime, there will be more war, and it looks like there will be war with China and the U.S. I would hope that Japan would stay out of it. Your politicians want war, it seems, or want military spending. I would hope you'd stay out of it. If you're going to get involved, I would try to find friends who will help you survive. The way things are now, it looks like China certainly has more chance of surviving than some countries because of where they are. But I am not Japanese, and I cannot tell you what to do. But if I were Japanese, I would stay out of any fight.
Korean Peninsula, do you think it's the right time to invest in, suppose, North Korea, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not allowed to invest in North Korea, but it's probably a very good place to invest now. It's very cheap, lots of assets, doesn't have much debt, disciplined labor, lots of cheap labor, educated labor, disciplined labor, right on the Chinese border. I cannot invest in North Korea, but in history, if you invest in countries like that, East Germany, if you'd invested in East Germany, you would have gotten very rich. South Vietnam, if you'd invest in countries like that, you might have gotten very rich. North Vietnam. So history is pretty clear. But yes, I consider Korea a good place to be learning about, to be investing in, especially North Korea. But I am not allowed to invest in North Korea, so I am not. I do not want to go to jail, even if I get rich.
Okay.
Inflation is not good for any, well, it's good for a few people, but inflation is not good. So you have to learn how it works. Real assets usually go up. I have some silver right here.
There's a system called NISA in Japan. So it's kind of a small investment for short. Any advice for Japanese investors? Do you think they should invest in stocks or invest in index funds, or any practical advice?
So I cannot say too many times, stay with what you know, and that's how you will be successful. Everybody knows something about something. Stay with it. Now, some people will say, oh, Jim, that's boring. Ryan, be boring. If you want to be a successful investor, be boring.